Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Welcome to part 2 of a brand new series. In this series, as per usual, we are reading documents, literature, writings left behind by the ancestors. This one going back to the year 1811. This book was written by a gentleman by the name of Julien Prévost, and he was a high-ranking official in the Haitian revolutionary government in the north, a close associate of King Henry Christophe, and this book was written from his first-person perspective, right? Now, this book is entitled The Glorious Events That Brought the Royal Majesties to the Throne of Haiti. Now, not only was this book significant because it was the first book published by black men on our own independent printing press in the Western Hemisphere from our own perspective, uncensored and unhindered, but it also gave us an account. It's like we're having a conversation with the ancestor himself. Like when I listened back to part 1, it was as if the ancestor himself was speaking directly to me, giving me an account of what was going on during those times. So, very powerful when we get literature coming directly from the source, not secondhand, third-hand, fourth-hand sources, right? Or the Europeans, revisionist history. We get it directly from the men and women who were actually there, actually experiencing the events and actually wrote down what they seen and what they felt during that time, right? Now, if you haven't watched part 1, go check it out. But we're going to be picking up where we left off at part 1, right? In part 1, we discussed how after the assassination of Dessalines, the nation was split into 2 rival factions. In the north, led by Christophe, right? Christophe established a centralized government in the north where the government held a lot of control and influence over the economy, right? In the south, led by Alexander Pichon, right? A republic dominated by, mixed race generals who preferred private land ownership and less government oversight over their economic interests, right? So from 1807 to 1811, both factions clashed in military confrontations, with both sides trying to reign supreme over the country, their ideology, their form of government trying to reign supreme over the entire nation, right? So after a few years of a military stalemate, the nation was effectively split into 2 regimes, right? With the Northern Monarchy, taking the Northern Territory and the Southern Republic taking the Southern Territory. Now, where we left off at in part 1, we discussed the return of an influential figure by the name of Andre Rigaud, right? Now, Andre Rigaud was Toussaint Louverture's old rival. If you remember back in the days of Toussaint Louverture, it was Toussaint Louverture who controlled the north side, right? And Andre Rigaud controlled the south side. So that was essentially the precursor to the civil war we see happening right now between Christophe and Alexander Pichon, because Christophe was the protege of Toussaint Louverture and Alexander Pichon was the protege of Andre Rigaud. So in part 1, we discussed the various military engagements between the northern military and the southern military, which were very intense, very intense. It was literally as if the ancestor was on the phone with me, telling me what happened. It was very intense. And now we're going to go to part 2. Andre Rigaud has somehow escaped from a French prison, right? He somehow snuck over to the United States. He evaded the British patrols and somehow landed back in the country in his stronghold of southern Haiti. And that's where we left off at. The ancestor, the author of the book, Julien Prévost, he just told us what happened. So now we're going to pick up directly from there. Let's get into it. He avoids the British cruisers and lands on April 7th, 1810, towards the evening in the town of Lecay. Now they're talking about Andre Rigaud, like I said before, the old general from the revolution, the rival of Toussaint Louverture. He is received with welcome by those of his supporters whose mad and presumptuous hopes he had came to raise. But the majority of good citizens hide or keep silent. They do not allow themselves to be stunned by the declamations of this supposed martyr of liberty, of this vile apostle of lies, of this cowardly instrument of our enemies. God damn. Listen, obviously, as you can tell, the author of the book, Julien Prévost, has zero respect for General Andre Rigaud. He doesn't care if this is an old elder from the revolution. To him, this is an enemy of the state. Let's continue. Soon he goes to Port-au-Prince, not having succeeded in taking the shreds of this usurped authority, because the traitors do not understand each other. He returns to the town of Lecay with the most cunning of his supporters, and there he ends up by effecting the splitting of the Department of the South with the part of the West occupied by the rebels, while waiting to be able to substitute himself in the place of Alexander Pichon, the present object of his ambition. Now, time out. General Andre Rigaud, like I said before, that was the original leader of the South, right? Alexander Pichon was simply his protege, right? That was simply after he was sent off to a French prison, Alexander Pichon took over as the leader of the South. But the South was the stronghold of Andre Rigaud. Everybody knows Andre Rigaud, that was the king of the South. So when he came back from French prison, he essentially like they said in the book, he split the southern half in two. So he essentially tried to overthrow Alexander Pichon, and essentially what happened was the nation, for a very brief period, for a very small period of, a few months or whatever, it was split into three sections, right? With Christophe in the north, with Pichon controlling a section of the south, and Andre Rigaud controlling his old stronghold by the town of Lekai. So for a very brief period, the nation was split in three regimes. It's totally insane. The mulattoes done split the country, done split the South in half. Let's continue. Here arises the saddest reflection for humanity. We are aware that our internal disagreements are the joy of the friends of slavery. Our common enemies have a grudge against our days. They are calculating nothing less than the total annihilation of the population of Haiti, which they would like to be able to replace with the new unfortunate transplants from the African countries. We know the full depth of their wickedness and their evil, and we hasten at will, unfortunately, to serve them effectively by destroying ourselves. Oh, delirium. Damn, time out. You see the ancestor having some very deep reflections right there. Let's continue. Oh, delirium. Oh, inconceivable fatality. Where do you not take the men who listen to the false illusions of ambition? Do we not fear that our enemies will apply these two verses to us and lavish with blood that they should spare, take by immolating themselves their care to avenge us? Andre Rigaud is all the more guilty, since having experienced at different times the effects of the cunning of the French government, he contends yet a third time to become their instrument and to work for the ruin of his compatriots. Enlightened as he is, the language he had to use upon touching the soil of Haiti was as noble as it was easy to express. I return, he should have said, to the head of the government from these lands, barbarians, whereas the price of my cowardly complacency, I languished in dungeons. I heard the deliberations for the ruin of my fellow citizens, welcomed from the moment it was judged that I could cooperate in this abominable design. I immediately found myself caressed. My ambition was tempted. I was offered a fortune and the reinstatement of the former rank that I occupied. The madmen, how could they have believed that I was so devoid of reason and common sense, so cowardly and stupid as to lend myself to their criminal views? The two cruel experiences that I've undergone, I have consented to everything. I have promised everything to free myself from the chains of slavery. My first thought upon approaching this land, classic of liberty, is to recognize the sovereignty of who governs it, and whose cause is inseparable from mine. I must confess my past sins and lay my repentance, and swear fidelity, and work henceforth to consolidate the liberty and independence of my country, the only goal for which I took up arms. Certainly, and we are not afraid to say it, if he had held such a pledge, if he had used his influence to bring Alexander Pichon and his associates back to good principles, if he had not sought to dismember the state in order to appropriate the spoils, he would have been received with open arms by Christophe, who would have forgiven him for his faults, his past errors, and he would have wished God to forgive them. He would have attracted the blessings of the people. Instead, by following a diametrically opposed course of action, Andre Rigaud is preparing himself for the most sinister omens. And as a final perspective, he is digging his own grave and the graves of his supporters. Now, time out. Now, in that book, the author of the book is basically saying that if Andre Rigaud had returned to the country and respected the sovereignty of the country, right, respected the fact that there are leaders already established in the country, instead of coming back to the country and trying to take territory for yourself and trying to advance your own personal interests, instead of looking at the interests of the collective, then the author of the book said that Christophe and the generals up north, we would have embraced you. We would have embraced you and acknowledged you and respected you. But because you came back to the country only seeking to empower yourself personally at the expense of the collective, then, like the author said, you are digging your own grave and the graves of your supporters. So, like I said, don't let the good language and the good vocabulary fool you, right? These are some top-ranked generals that have fought against the major colonial powers of the world, right? These are some black men who have fought against some of the most powerful armies of the planet during that time. So don't let the good language fool you. These were men who were about that life. That's why he said, listen, you are digging your grave and the graves of your supporters. Now let's continue. You were the first to show the troops how to break from discipline. When you want to put them back into duty, you will no longer be able to do so. They will turn their weapons stained by crime against you. To prolong your existence, you will be obliged to let them do whatever they want. When the state treasures which you have squandered are exhausted, you will no longer be able to pay them off. You will be forced to resort to extreme measures and to suffer the disastrous effects of all their license. As for General Alexander Pichon, I feel sorry for him. Instead of being the leader, he is only the slave and the instrument of your faction. When he is well engaged and things are desperate, you will abandon him, as you, notably Bonnet, abandoned General Villat. By provoking civil war, you will be responsible for all the disasters that result from it. For one knows the day one draws one's sword from its scabbard, no one can know the moment when one will be able to sheathe it. Could one speak more prophetically? Did not everything Christophe predict come to pass? Did not the principal force of the most egregious treason find himself in turn betrayed and abandoned by the dishonest people who had dragged him into the abyss? Was not General Bonnet one of the first men to go and join Andre Rigaud and declare himself against the rebellious Pétion? I will now resume the series of events. Christophe, having employed all the means his great soul dictated, and despairing of triumphing over the city of Mole without the force of arms, resolved to take command in person of the troops besieging the town. And after vigorous operations in which he displayed his talents in the great art of war, he had the glory of taking control of this famous rebel city, and of making those who defended it lay down their arms at their discretion, after the two principal leaders, General Lamar and General Eveillard, had lost their lives there. Now, time out. If you watch part 1, I'm sure you heard the name come up a lot. General Lamar, that was one of the generals from the South that was, attacking the North. And as you can see in this part of the book, General Lamar has been killed. Now, let's continue. The operations of this siege alone would require a long-term effort, for they are teeming with a host of feats of bravery and heroism, which are the hallmarks of the Haitian nation. Here is the proclamation of Christophe addressed to the army after the capture of the city, and which so well depicts the feelings of his heart. Now, if you take a look up on the screen, as you can see, a proclamation directly coming from Christophe himself. Now, I love reading, Christophe's declarations, his writings. It's like I'm having a conversation with the ancestor, where the ancestor is talking directly to me. So, Christophe said this in the year 1810. I think it was 1810. Starting from the top, proclamation from the President and Generalissimo of the Land and Sea Forces to the Land and Sea Army of the State of Haiti. Soldiers, the city of Mont Saint-Nicolas has just succumbed under the force of your arms. The rebellion is extinguished in this part, and you have planted on all sides the flags of the legitimate authorities, already so famous for the numerous triumphs won over the enemies of liberty. 20 days of regular siege were enough to destroy them from top to bottom. The fortresses that parasital hands had erected to the genius of rebellion. In vain, a so-called expeditionary army had flattered itself that it would perpetuate internal dissensions and incense in the altars of error. Your arms, armed for the most just of causes, have in a few days overturned these edifices and buried beneath their proud debris the audacity, the projects, and the hope of a criminal faction. My God, Christophe, man, bars. Christophe with the bars, man. Let's continue. God damn. Tired of wasting time in order to spare blood, having realized that nothing could be compared to my patience and my kindness, if not the hardening and inflexibility of the factious, I decided the fate of the criminal place. Immediately, the two leaders who successively commanded there bit the dust. Obviously, Christophe is talking about General Lamar. Rest in peace, General Lamar. Rest in peace to the ancestor, General Lamar, who I'm not going to disrespect General Lamar because he was a Haitian revolutionary leader. He fought against the French and all the European powers. But General Lamar, towards the end of his life, was fighting against Christophe. So unfortunately for General Lamar, Christophe, he was dancing on his grave. He was like, listen, them boys bit the dust. Let's continue. Two of their shattered warships offer no more in the harbor than their powerless carcasses. A considerable pile of cannons, mortars, ammunitions, and provisions of all kinds is the result of your work, the price of your valor. And these men who came from the depths of the South with the intention of stealing your most precious goods, obliged to surrender at discretion, have known that your clemency was equal to your valor. Such is always the reward of true courage. Nothing resists it because it is fueled by loyalty to its leader, guided by honor, and inspired by love of the country. Soldiers, and you brave sailors who have rivaled the land army in everything, you whose efforts have mastered the winds, the currents, and the waves. In the crews that will be admired by the most experienced sailors, the new brilliance that your glorious exploits have just reflected on the weapons of your leader is the finest praise. Indeed, the zeal, the constancy, the loyalty, the fidelity, and the bravery that you have displayed in 100 battles, necessitated by the most inconceivable determination, are my pride and my glory. Yes, I have recognized in you those brave warriors, the founders of liberty and independence, and I have more than once in this campaign glorified myself in being at your head. How sweet it is for me to declare that you have all deserved well of the fatherland, and how satisfying it will be from my heart to award honorable rewards to those among you who have distinguished yourselves the most. But it is little to distinguish oneself in the career of heroes. There is another virtue, another kind of glory, that which we must give an example. You have seen these fierce supporters of error, these obstinate partisans of a cause that shames reason, as well as nature. You have seen them, I say, these unfortunate children of the South, cowardly, abandoned, and betrayed by their comrades, after having experienced all that human disgraces have of the most bitter, after having been forced to lay down their arms and come to throw themselves at my knees, to recognize their errors and beg for my clemency and forgiveness. They believed to find in me an angry victor. They expected to read on my outraged brow their sentence of death. Those ingrates. They have witnessed only my compassion and the tears that their repentance has wrung from me. Now, goddamn. Goddamn, man. Listen, man. That boy Christophe was good with them words, and he was good with the sword, man. He said, man, those ingrates. Goddamn, man. Let's continue. You yourselves, soldiers, moved by this example, you have nobly shared with them your tents, your food, and your clothing. They have found in you only brothers, and your arms have carefully carried their sick and their wounded back to the hospital, to be treated and to be cared for like companions. What am I saying? The regiment, the very one that first raised the standard of revolt, as well as the remnants of the 16th, the 18th, the 21st, the 22nd, the 23rd, and the 24th, taken prisoner, are today astonished to take rank in the army of Haiti. But let the surprise cease. Let them know that in punishing, a father is always a father, and let them recall to their memory these words of the common father of mortals. Now, time out. If you notice, Christophe actually said that the soldiers from the South that were taken prisoner during the Civil War, he actually integrated them into his military in the North, right? So the soldiers from the South, Alexander Pichon soldiers that were captured by Christophe, he integrated them into the Northern military. Instead of killing them or, humiliating them, we took them to the hospital, gave them some food and clothes and things like that, took care of our brothers and integrated them into the military, right? Now you're going to actually get paid now, right? Unlike the Army of the South, janky administration. Now, the Army of the North, you're actually going to be, well equipped and well paid and, taken care of, and you're going to be able to feed your family and take care of your wife, right? Let's continue. There is more joy in heaven for a sheep that is found than for 100 who have never strayed. May this quality of magnanimity soften the hearts of those who still foment or caress imposture. May they finally learn that it is beautiful to sacrifice one's private passions for the general interest. May they consider that the vile agents of the French government, like hungry vultures, are only waiting for the moment to pounce on their prey. May they reflect that the ship of independence on board which we have all embarked must save itself or perish with the passengers, and that to arrive safely at the destination, it is glorious to join forces with brothers who know how to fight, conquer, and to forgive. For me, convinced that our divisions are the joy and the hope of our enemies, persuaded that this country is the only one still open to free souls, certain by experience that the cause of blacks and mulattoes is one and inseparable, instructed by sufficient data that our common tyrants are plotting new schemes to make our internal disagreements interminable, I call heaven and men to witness that no sacrifice will cost me when it comes to reuniting the children of my country under my father's aegis, confident in my own means, sure of the legitimacy of my cause, and strong in the ascendancy they gave me. I am not afraid to renew here the general amnesty that I have already offered to achieve the salvation of the state, the sole object of my ambition. But if it is desirable that a portion of Haitians, still misguided, return from their error and atone for their wrongdoings of several years with a moment of repentance, it is in the public interest that the members of the great family come together to ward off the despair and the terror of our enemies. It is no less necessary to maintain the attitude appropriate to men who, having done much, know that they still have much to do. Soldiers, you will return to your respective garrisons and cantonments to relax from the painful fatigues you have endured. Bring there that spirit of order, subordination, and discipline, the sacred pledge of victory. I will distribute the prize for valor to those who have distinguished themselves by fine actions. Your corps will be completed and once again dressed and equipped. Therefore, you can enjoy in peace the fruit of your labors and be ready at the first signal to complete the triumph of the legitimate authorities. Dated October 8th, 1810. Now, goddamn, time out. Now, when I listen back to these videos and I listen back, it's like as if the ancestor himself is speaking to me. It's crazy. But anyway, let's continue. With amazing transports of joy, Christophe was received upon his return from the campaign. Everyone threw laurels of victory in his footsteps. And from the town of Port-de-Paix to the capital, there was nothing but triumphal arches, trophies, raised by the love of the people. His journey was a true triumphal march. How sweet, how glorious to be loved this much. And also how satisfying to have virtuous citizens who think the same. Among the verses written on this occasion, the following ode must find its place here. Now, then it goes into a song that was written back in 1811. Now, I'm not going to sing the song. You know, it's in French, and I don't know the melody or how the song went, but it was essentially a song written, you know, I guess in commemoration of the military victory over the Southern rebels. Now, anyway, let's continue. The Civil War happily ended, and the North was completely cleared away of enemies. The troops were sent home to enjoy the rest they badly needed. Receive, brave and faithful submissive troops, and the legitimate authority, the tribute and admiration, and the homage or recognition from one of your comrades in arms, who knows the spirit of the soldier, who loves to be among you, who has sometimes shared your dangers, and for whom your fate cannot be indifferent. The God of the armies has blessed and crowned your arms with glory. Thanks be to you. You have delivered your fellow citizens from the furies of civil war and anarchy. You have undoubtedly done much, but you believe you have done nothing yet. As long as you have yet to plant your victorious flags in all the places stained by rebellion. For a little while longer, the conquest of the town of Mole must prove to you that nothing is impossible, led by a warrior like the one who governs us. Not yet relieved of all the fatigues, Christophe takes care of the organization of the army and the navy. He reviewed the troops, and as the roll call is made, has an account given to the last soldier of each corps, sends back to the cultivation work those who he does not consider should continue their service, replaces them with young men, appoints the vacant places, brings the regiments and crews to full strength, and has the weapons of the troops and the ships of the squadron repaired and put in good condition. He equipped the army and supplied the fleet to put it in a position to resume its cruise. He organized the southern troops who have submitted and appointed them to vacant positions in the body and makes them take their place in the army. Disabused of their error, he sees them only as his children. Christophe concerned himself with the method of leasing state property and in the distribution of farms. He does not forget that those unfortunate wives and those unfortunate orphans whom the fate of arms or the events of nature have deprived of a husband and of a father. He replaces this loving father not only by ensuring their subsistence, but by procuring for them the benefits of an education which must enable them to replace the authors of their days. Now, time out. I want to talk about that. That was very significant, and that actually touched me right there. It said, obviously, as you know, in the year 1810, by now, you know, going back to, 1791, when the rebellion first broke out, you're talking about damn near 20 years of, on and off combat, right? And obviously a result of combat is going to be obviously, death on the battlefield. And when a soldier dies, it's not only a soldier that dies, but also a brother, a son, a father, and a husband that also dies. So as a result of these wars and engagements, there were a lot of, beautiful women, honorable women that were left without a husband, and their children were left without a father. But in that book, it said Christophe actually stepped in to fill in that void that was left behind by, death and, destruction and war, right? Saying that those who didn't have a father, or, your father fell, honorably and victoriously on the battlefield of liberty and independence, right? He came in and made sure that their subsistence was met, right? Everything they needed was taken care of, whatever that might have been. Right now, in the modern day, that might have been, making sure the bills and the rent was paid and things like that, truly, walking in the embodiment of the protector and the provider of a nation, right? Understanding the importance of the family unit and taking time out of his day and taking state resources to invest in repairing those families that were destroyed, right? So I think that's something that really I highly respect about Christophe. And, if you remember other series, other books I've read, they also mention how inside his palace, right, there were many orphans, that Christophe took those orphans in as his own children in the palace. So when you go to the palace, it'd be not only his own children, but his children were living amongst, legions of other children that were also the sons and daughters of other, honorable comrades that fell on the battlefield of liberty and independence. So, shout out to Christophe, man. Let's continue. Christophe visited the provinces, Everywhere he is received, not as a conqueror, but as a revitalizing genius who comes to visit these regions. His improving eye embraces all parts. He has the sweet satisfaction of seeing that everywhere the farmers, regularly paid a quarter of the revenue they produce, bless him for the comfort they now enjoy. If unjust and greedy farmers no longer defraud the wages of their work and do not fatten themselves with their sweat, if cattle no longer ravage their food places, if the banana ripens on the beloved banana tree, it is Christophe that these men of nature owe. Christophe animates industry. He inflames the commerce. In his presence, the people burst into raptures. Unequivocal pledges of a love and an attachment that borders on idolatry. From his palace, he transports himself under the thatch of the farmer, as into the barracks of the soldier, and always their happiness is the constant object of his most lively and his most tender solicitudes. The restoration of morals placed on the agenda influences the peace and tranquility of the households. Vice now hides its shameful debauchery. The sacred bonds of marriage are formed at will. These tender ties which unite man to woman create virtuous companions attached to citizens to the country, to the great family of the state, by the image of his own and domestic happiness, and for greater encouragement, the supreme leader himself gives the touching example of conjugal virtues. He proves that morals are the qualities of good monarchs, and make the glory of their reigns, just as license is born of bad princes and brings dishonor to the government. Christophe believes that he must give into his generous heart. Touched by the calamities of the Civil War, from the heart of victory, he sacrifices his resentments. He forgets that his offers, his words of peace, have been so many times scorned. He believes that he owes it to his fellow citizens to convince them even more particularly of his intentions, to send peace missionaries to Port-au-Prince, to the rebel Alexander Pichon. He follows these missionaries with a deputation of 12 soldiers from the various corps of the South, who lay down their arms at the town of Mole, to enlighten their comrades on the treatment they have received. Now, time out. Now, Christophe is making overtures to the Southern generals, and actually the delegation that he sends down to the South were actually soldiers from the South that he integrated into his military. So he's taking the soldiers that he took from his military and sending them as a delegation to the Southern generals to essentially, open some kind of conversation. Now let's continue. One would have expected that such sincere offers would have been appreciated, as they should have been. And already all the good citizens were flattering themselves about the cessation of the war. Vain hope. Their dream has vanished. Christophe's heart was even more convinced that it was only by deploying rigorous means, as at the town of Mole, that he would have had the hope of triumphing over the too culpable stubbornness of the rebels. I happily avoided the details of all our misfortunes. I arrived at the most interesting part of my work. The genius of the country. Inflame my spirit with this holy love of my fellow men. Truth, it is under your auspices that I took up the pen. Deign to guide it, that my writings, animated by your sublime eloquence, may carry them to the most far removed. The glory and virtue of Christophe, that his beloved name be pronounced abroad only with the veneration that it should inspire, that enlightened by his great qualities and by the account of what he did for his people and for his descendants, foreigners finally agree that in the portion of this class of men, until then groaning under the yoke of prejudice, there were found, as among them, these extraordinary beings, evidently protected by nature and by the heavens, who were to appear in the revolutions of the earth to heal their wounds and replace social order within the limits from which the impetuous course of events had removed it. Now, we can end part two. We can end part two right here. Part two. I don't know how many parts it's going to be. From what I can tell, this seems like it's going to be a pretty long book, but we'll see how it plays out. We are at part two, and I believe that we are towards the end of the year 1810 and the top of the year 1811. And as you know, this book was written by one of Christophe's close associates, one of the high-ranking members of the government, a gentleman by the name of Julien Prévost. Shout out to him. Excellent book, excellent book. In this book, we actually got to hear a declaration that Christophe gave to the military in the year 1810. Christophe called the Southern generals a bunch of ingrates. That was funny. Christophe, talking about how he's helping, the children and the women that lost their husbands and their fathers. Excellent episode, man. Excellent book, excellent episode. We can end it right here. Now, listen. Earlier today, I dropped my first ever music video. Listen, and it's right on time because it actually is right in line with this series, right? The name of the track, Cap Henry in 1814. Go check that out. Link in the description. Check out the music video. I'm going to play it at the end of this clip right here. We can end it right here. Join the Patreon, NTD1814. Enjoy the album, and I'm gone. Peace.
Yeah. We back. Spreading my wings and I had to get fly. Up at the top, an incredible vibe. Came from the bottom, I'm up in the sky. Give one look and said, baby, you fine. Wake up each morning and handle my business. They just be talking, you see me, I live. Ride on my enemies, sounding like thunder. 1804, got that shit in my spirit. 1804 when I step in the building. 1804, that's word of my mother. Rise my women and die for my brother. Never gonna fall when I'm deep under pressure. Tell them we back and they better accept it. Move like a king, every step is divine. Ride on my enemies with no exception. Taking revenge and I'm taking what's mine. Told me she love me and said that it's real. So independent, ain't signing no deal. Feel like a king and I'm up at Cap Henry. I'm in the citadel, top of the hill. Trying to run up and we let off a cannon. Secret location, I'm keeping it sealed. You ain't retaliate, Franco Medina. Came to the country and he got killed. You ain't retaliate, Rafi and Mans. Thought you was loyal, thought you was real. Didn't even want to come pick up the body. Had your man locked up, he died in the cell. Up at the palace, I'm throwing a party. Right on the south and I'm giving them hell. And my little shorty, she looking exotic. African features, she casting a spell. Run to the check like I work on my fitness. Wake up each morning and handle my business. Said that she love me, she want my genetics. Wanna get married and make it official. Wanna get married and have my babies. Up in the city, I'm riding Mercedes. Up in the city, they treat me like royalty. Feeling like Dolph, talking about lords. Spreading my wings and I had to get fly. Up at the top, an incredible vibe. Came from the bottom, I'm up in the sky. Give one look and said, baby, you fine. Wake up each morning and handle my business. They just be talking, you see me, I live. Ride on my enemies, sounding like thunder. 1804, got that shit in my spirit. 1804 when I step in the building. 1804, that's word of my mother. Rise my women and die for my brother. Never gonna fall when I'm deep under pressure. Tell them we back and they better accept it. Move like a king, every step is divine. Ride on my enemies with no exception. Taking revenge and I'm taking what's mine. Pour up a drink and it's time that we toast. Watching my back, keep my enemies close. Only the family, I stick with my brothers. Cannon's position outside of the coast. Heavy artillery for the protection. Move like a general, stick to the code. Feel like a king when I'm up in the north. Beautiful women, they trying to get chose. Launch an invasion all over the south. Capture the capital with all my woes. Look at my energy and my demeanor. Dripping that ice and that's head of my toes. Lately I'm flexing all on the Americans. Flexing my muscle on missing my road. Just got a carriage just coming from London. Boy, that shit cash, I ain't taking no loans. Boy, that shit cash, that's fresh on the boat. Enemy know I got millions in gold. Enemy know I got choppers and cannons. How did I do it? They can't understand it. How did I do it? It's cause I'm relentless. Call me King Harry, my name is cemented. Call me King Harry, I'm up in the palace.